Hi, and thank you for tuning in to the Daily Dose for Spiritual Growth. Here we are at Saturday. We've been talking this week about desires and comparing our sinful desires to our God given desires, talking about how our sinful desires lead to destruction, but how when we focus on God and we grow in a desire from Him, it leads to life and righteousness, and the fruit of the Spirit are just evident in our lives. I couldn't this week talk about this struggle between desires without talking about the very greatest example that we have of a man who was able to manage that tension. It wasn't a normal man, it was Jesus himself. In Luke chapter 22, beginning in verse 39, we see a little bit of the struggle that Jesus had with his earthly desires and his heavenly desires. It says in verse 39, then accompanied by his disciples, Jesus left the upstairs room and he went as usual to the Mount of Olives. There he told them, pray that you will not give in to temptation. So we've been talking about this week. And he walked away about a stone's throw and he knelt down and prayed, Father, if you are willing, please take this cup of suffering away from me. You see, Jesus in this moment, he's talking about what's to come. That cup of suffering is that sacrifice on the cross. And it's beautiful when we know that he followed through, that he knew here beforehand the pain, the cost, the hurt that it was going to cost him. And in his humanity, he's crying out to God saying, God, if there's any way that I don't have to go through with your plan, if there's any way that I don't have to do this, this is going to hurt. This is hard. If there's any way, please take this away from me. And see, when it comes to temptation, we have this struggle of not wanting to obey God. Sometimes we want to give in to our earthly flesh, oftentimes. And so what do we do in those moments? Well, Jesus gives us a beautiful example here. Let me read what he said again. He says, Father, if you are willing, please take this cup of suffering away from me. Yet, I want your will to be done, not mine. You see, we have a choice, and this comes down to surrender. You and I are going to have desires the rest of our life, some good, some very, very bad. But what comes to a front, what we come when we get to that point of confrontation with those desires is this: where is your allegiance? Where is your loyalty? Are you going to be more allegiant to your own desires? Or like Jesus, are you going to say, hey, God, I'm not denying it. I have this desire to not do what you want me to do. I have this desire to go my own way. I have my desire to pursue this thing. But God, I want you more. God, I want your desires. I want to honor you more than I want to honor myself. I want to please you more than I want to please my own earthly desires. God, I want your will, your plans for my life to be fulfilled, not my own. This is what we're all striving for, to get to a place where we set aside, surrender at the altar, our own for his, because God's way is better. I want to read just the rest of this in closing today. After he says, not your will, or not my will, but your will be done. It says, then an angel from heaven appeared and strengthened him. Don't let yourself lose that verse. When we choose, even if we just muster up all the strength we have to say, God, I choose you. God, I really want to give into this, but no, I'm going to choose you. God will come and strengthen us in that moment. It says he prayed more fervently, and he was in such agony of spirit that his sweat fell onto the ground like great drops of blood. And as you know, the story goes on. He goes to his disciples who have been caught sleeping once again. We see modeled by our Savior the importance of prayer. We see him going to his Father over and over. As God in his sovereignty, he was fully God. He didn't need that. He was full of God, but in his humanity, his frailty, he was empty. And he had to go back over and over and over again to get recentered, repurposed in the Father's plans. And that's what we can learn from Jesus. When you're feeling weak in your temptation, when those desires, those thoughts, those yearnings are filling your mind, We need to pray. We need to say aloud, God, this is what I'm wanting, but no, I want you more. We need Christian accountability, people in our life that will support us. We need to stand on the principles of the Bible. Desires will be a part of our life our whole life, but how we respond to them, what we choose, is how we can grow in our faith. I encourage you this week as you think about your own desires, which ones are in alignment with God and which ones are not? And are you willing to put His will over your own? Hey, I want to thank you so much for tuning in today. We hope to see you at Shrewsbury Assembly of God tomorrow in person or online as we're continuing our series called Let's Go. We would love to have you. Otherwise, we'll be back on Monday for another daily dose for spiritual growth.